And welcome to 5 Live Boxing. Mike Costello and Steve Bunce are with me here in the studio. Special programme tonight on drugs in professional boxing. Most of the top sports around the world are tightening up on their testing procedures, but it appears that boxing is going the other way with potential disastrous consequences. Now, Mike, the subjects hit the headlines recently with the arguments surrounding the potential super fight between Floyd Mayweather and Manny Pacquiao.
And of all the big fights that haven't happened down the years, I've never known of one not to happen because of a row over drug testing. Both fighters, Mayweather and Pacquiao, agreed to unlimited and random urine testing, but the point which scuppered the fight was blood testing. Now, Floyd Mayweather wanted the blood testing to continue right through until a point at 14 days before the fight, but Pacquiao was refusing to take a blood test at any time 24 days before the fight, and therefore they had this 10-day difference, and in the end they refused to budge, and the fight didn't happen. It may happen later in the year, but this is still a serious difference that's got to be resolved.
And over the last couple of weeks, you've been speaking to a whole spectrum of people. It'll make uncomfortable listening for boxing fans.
Yeah, we've been trying to catch the general mood in boxing. We talked to a boxer, to administrators, to promoters, and also to the man behind the most wide-ranging scandal in the history of sport, who's now involved in boxing. And remember, this is a sport now that he's become involved in, where drug cheats like Roy Jones Jr., a man that many claim to be the best fighter that's ever lived, tested positive for steroids after a world title fight and received no punishment. He didn't lose his title, he wasn't banned, he wasn't fined. And that's the kind of situation that concerns many in the sport.
And Steve, this is a serious issue. I mean, all drugs in sport is a serious issue, but a potential of a dirty fighter against a clean fighter could have disastrous consequences.
Yeah, well, part of the problem here, and you touched on it in the start, is that suddenly boxing, which has occupied the high moral ground in many years when it comes to drugs, you know, we've said we've got this, but we don't have steroids. You've got all sorts of stuff. We haven't got drugs. It's fantastic. We haven't got any steroid users. And of course, the problem is, as several people have talked about, and Frank Warren alluded to it in that short clip there, is it's not a race. It's not a weightlifting contest. It's not a rowing contest, and it's not a butterfly contest. It's a contest to hurt somebody. It's called the noble art of self-defense, but really it's the ignoble art of grabbing someone and knocking them spark out. That's the bottom line. And it is fact. If the playing field isn't even, if there are dirty competitors, that gives them an advantage. Not all of the time, but it gives them an advantage.
Well, Mike, we start the programme with perhaps the most infamous name in the world of drugs in sport.
Yeah, Victor Conte is the man behind the Balco scandal, which hit a wide range of sports in 2003 and beyond, became the biggest scandal in the history of sport. Among the big names that were caught up in the storm, Marion Jones, Dwayne Chambers, and the one boxer was Shane Mosley. And some said at the time, because I cover athletics as well, that it very nearly brought the sport down. There were so many big name athletes caught up in this particular scandal. And Victor Conte himself went to prison for 4 months, but he's now working with professional boxers, and he's scathing about the drug testing policies in place.
Well, I think the testing that's being utilized in boxing is virtually worthless. It's what they call announced testing. I also often refer to it as IQ testing. They test you before a fight and after a fight, one for performance-enhancing drugs. The list of things, substances they test for is not complete. The other test they do is for recreational drugs. But these athletes have advisors that clearly understand that all you have to do is taper off the different species of drugs. And for example, creams and gels will clear in a day, things like testosterone. Orals will clear in 4 or 5 days. Water-based testosterone will clear in probably 10 days. So all they do is taper off before they show up, and there will be no EPO or testosterone or growth hormone, or so the testing is completely and totally inept in the sport of boxing.
And given what you know about the background of professional sports in the United States, would you say that drug abuse in boxing is rife?
Well, until in any sport, but let's talk specifically about boxing, until those who control the majority of the financial gain from boxing develop a true interest, a genuine interest in reducing the use of performance-enhancing drugs in the sport, it will continue to be rampant. They're just nothing more than propaganda is being promoted. And they say things like, well, we have effective testing, it's just fine, blah, blah, blah. I don't believe they want to know how rampant the use of drugs really is. In short, in boxing as well as other sports, the loopholes are enormous, and I don't think that a genuine effort is being made to establish an effective program, and I don't know that there's any willingness there, once again, by those that have the financial ability to create and implement such a program.
And are you working with professional boxers at the moment, Victor?
Yes, I am.
And who are they?
Most recently, I've been working with Andre Ward, and I'm now helping Eddie Chambers prepare for the World Championship fight with Vladimir Klitschko in Germany on March the 20th, and I also work with Steve Chambers, who's Eddie's younger brother.
And is someone like Andre Ward, who had a terrific win last year against Mikhail Kessner, not worried that his association with you might lead to some people suggesting that he's not doing it by fair means?
The athletes that are associating with me and taking the products that I develop are probably the cleanest athletes in sport. They know they're going to be target tested. I think it is bad because Andre Ward is a tremendously talented guy. He's a religious guy. His trainer, Virgil Ward, is a great guy. These are people that are doing it the right way. They had an excellent record for many years before they ever met me. I'm certainly not the reason for Andre Ward's success. He deserves 100% of the credit. I do feel bad, and I think it's very sad that people jump to the conclusion. It's been 6 years now since Balco, and September 3rd, 2003, the day of the raid, was my last day of wrongdoing. And I've tried to help the anti-doping agencies in every way that I can, and I'm grateful to those athletes that have found forgiveness in their hearts and enabled me to continue doing what I like to do, which is help athletes perform at the elite level. So I'm very grateful to Andre and Eddie and these other athletes. And you're right, they are probably being taken undue criticism for their association with me, but I don't think any credit should be taken away from them.
But like you said yourself, there are enormous loopholes, and if anybody could find their way through them, it's you, given your background, isn't it?
Well, and on the other hand, this enables me to advise them on what potential competitors are doing. And in negotiations like the case recently with Floyd Mayweather and Manny Pacquiao, there were people on the inside that did come to me and talk to me during these discussions. So I think that, the knowledge ironically qualifies me to help determine what would be a good and effective anti-doping set of policies and procedures in boxing. And if the individual fighters, which I don't think anybody should be singled out, I think what's good for the goose should be good for the gander. And, I don't think it was really fair for Manny Pacquiao to all of a sudden be subjected to a completely different standard than everyone else. But at the same time, you've got to understand that if you allow even up to 14 days before a fight, you could completely use EPO to increase your hematocrit and your oxygen uptake and utilization ability. You could use testosterone or other types of steroids to increase your healing and speed and power. I would say a good cutoff would be random for the 2 months before a fight and up to 5 days before the fight. This would be my prescription. You could possibly go out to 10 days. As soon as you're out to not allowing testing on a random basis up to 14 days, that's a loophole you can drive a Mack truck through.
Well, that was Victor Conte talking to our boxing commentator, Mike Costello. Mike,